On a high-stakes mission, a cop is struck by a bullet and his blood begins to pool on the cold ground. No one is coming to help, and there's no way out. But in the blink of an eye, an unbelievable rescue emerges from an unlikely hero, the loyal K9 partner. Can it truly pull off a miracle? Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. No more waiting, the story begins right now. That way, you'll never miss another inspiring story like this one. The cold wind cut through the dark alleyways of downtown New York City, carrying the distant echoes of sirens. Sergeant Ethan Carter moved swiftly, his heartbeat steady despite the high-risk operation unfolding around him. Beside him, his canine German Shepherd, Zeus, padded silently, his sharp eyes scanning every shadow. This was supposed to be a routine drug bust, a takedown of one of the city's most dangerous gangs. But something felt off. Ethan's radio crackled. "Unit 4, do you have eyes on the target?" He pressed the button on his shoulder. "Negative. We're moving in." Zeus let out a low growl, ears twitching. The dog sensed something before Ethan did. A fraction of a second later, a gunshot tore through the silence. Pain exploded in Ethan's chest as he stumbled backward, his vision blurring. He had been hit. Zeus snapped into action. The canine German Shepherd barked ferociously, standing over Ethan as if daring anyone to come closer. Ethan struggled to stay conscious. His vest had taken part of the impact, but the bullet had pierced just below his ribs. Blood seeped through his uniform, and he could barely keep his gun steady. The radio crackled again. "Carter? Report! Carter!" But Ethan couldn't respond. His hands trembled and his strength was fading fast. The alley felt colder, darker, quieter. Zeus whined and nudged his handler, sensing the urgency of the moment. The dog's instinct told him that Ethan didn't have much time. Backup wasn't coming fast enough. If Zeus didn't act, Ethan would die right there in that alley. Zeus made his decision. With one last glance at Ethan, the canine German Shepherd bolted into the darkness, his powerful legs carrying him toward the only hope left, the station or anyone who could help. Would he make it in time? Zeus ran like never before. His powerful legs pounded against the pavement, his breath coming in short, determined bursts. His mind was set on only one thing, saving Ethan. The cold air bit into his thick fur, but he barely noticed. Every second that passed was a second closer to losing his handler. The streets of downtown New York City were nearly empty at this hour, dimly lit by flickering streetlights. Zeus moved like a shadow, dodging trash bins, leaping over puddles, and cutting through alleys. His ears twitched at every sound, but nothing mattered except finding help. Then a familiar scent, Officer James Briggs, Ethan's closest teammate. Zeus's sharp nose caught his presence nearby. Without hesitation, he turned and sprinted toward him. Briggs had just stepped out of his patrol car, radio in hand, checking in with dispatch. He wasn't expecting what happened next. A blur of fur and muscle lunged at him. "Zeus! Whoa! What the?" Briggs staggered as the dog's strong jaws clamped onto his sleeve, tugging with force. "Zeus! What's wrong, boy?" Zeus growled, his eyes burning with urgency. He barked a deep, commanding bark, then pulled at Briggs's arm again. Briggs' training kicked in. He had worked with Ethan and Zeus for years. He knew this wasn't just a random reaction. Something was wrong. His heart pounded. Where was Ethan? "Show me, boy. Where's Ethan?" Zeus immediately turned and took off into the darkness. Briggs didn't hesitate. He grabbed his radio as he sprinted after the canine. "Officer down, I repeat, officer down! Zeus just found me. We need paramedics now." The response was immediate. "Copy that, Unit 5. Location? Somewhere in the alley west of 5th Avenue and 42nd Street." Zeus ran at full speed, Briggs struggling to keep up. The canine German Shepherd's movements were swift and precise, weaving through the maze of dark streets until he stopped. Briggs followed his gaze. A dark alley, blood on the pavement, a motionless figure. Ethan. Briggs felt his stomach drop. Jesus Christ. He rushed forward, sliding onto his knees beside his partner. Ethan was barely conscious, his breath coming in shallow, painful gasps. His hand pressed weakly against the wound below his ribs, but the blood wouldn't stop. His face was pale, his eyes unfocused. "Ethan! Stay with me, buddy!" Briggs pressed his hands against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. The warmth of blood seeped through his gloves. Zeus whimpered, circling them, his ears pinned back in distress. The dog nosed Ethan's cheek, urging him to stay awake. Ethan's lips moved, but the words barely came out. Did he make it?" Briggs swallowed hard. "Yeah, Ethan, he made it. He brought me straight to you." Zeus let out a small whine, licking Ethan's face. Ethan's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good boy." His eyes fluttered closed. No, stay awake, damn it!" Briggs shouted, shaking him. "Help's coming, Ethan. Just hold on." The distant wail of sirens echoed through the streets, growing louder. Zeus suddenly turned, ears up, body tense. Someone was coming. The canine let out a deep, warning growl. Briggs pulled his gun, his eyes scanning the darkness. Had the gang come back to finish the job? Zeus moved in front of Ethan, standing his ground. His body was rigid, fur bristling. His deep chest rumbled with a warning snarl. Then, footsteps. Briggs held his breath. A shadow moved in the alley. Zeus's growl deepened. His claws scraped the pavement, his muscles tensed, ready to attack. Then, "CPD, lower your weapons. It's us." Briggs exhaled sharply. Backup had arrived. Zeus relaxed, his tail lowering, but he didn't move from Ethan's side. Paramedics rushed in, carrying gear, their hands already reaching for Ethan. "He's lost a lot of blood," Briggs said quickly, standing up and stepping aside. "Bullet wound, lower left side." "Got it," one of the paramedics responded. "We'll stabilize him." Ethan's body was lifted onto a stretcher. He barely reacted. Zeus whined loudly, trying to jump up after him. "Easy, boy." Briggs placed a firm hand on Zeus's back. "He's gonna be okay." The paramedics worked fast. A pressure bandage covered Ethan's wound, and an IV line was inserted. One of them called into their radio. "Patient is critical but stable. Transporting now." Zeus didn't move. He stared at Ethan, his ears twitching, his tail low. As they loaded Ethan into the ambulance, Zeus let out a long, heartbroken whine. He had done his part, but now all he could do was wait. The doors closed. The sirens screamed. The ambulance disappeared into the night. Briggs knelt down and ran a hand over Zeus's fur. "You did good, boy," he murmured. "Better than good." Zeus blinked, his chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. But his eyes never left the direction of the ambulance. He wasn't just Ethan's partner. He was his protector, and he wasn't leaving his side. The hospital lights flickered above as the stretcher rolled through the emergency room doors. Ethan's face was pale, his breathing shallow. The medical team moved fast, shouting vitals and instructions as they rushed him toward surgery. Outside, Zeus paced restlessly. His nails clicked against the hospital's tile floor as he kept his eyes locked on the doors where Ethan had disappeared. He didn't understand why he couldn't follow. He had never left Ethan's side before. Officer James Briggs sat on a plastic chair near the waiting room, watching Zeus with concern. The canine German shepherd's body was tense, ears flicking at every distant sound. Every time a nurse or doctor walked past, Zeus's head snapped up, his eyes full of desperate hope. But no one brought Ethan back. "Easy, boy," Briggs murmured, reaching out to stroke Zeus's thick fur. "He's in good hands." Zeus whined softly, pressing his nose against the floor where Ethan's scent lingered. The smell of blood and antiseptic filled his nostrils. Something inside him twisted. Ethan wasn't safe yet. Minutes dragged into hours. Finally, the door swung open. A doctor approached, pulling down his mask. "Sergeant Carter's out of surgery. The bullet did significant damage, but he's stable for now. He's being moved to ICU." Briggs exhaled in relief. "Can we see him?" The doctor hesitated, glancing at Zeus. "The dog. He stays." Briggs's tone left no room for argument. "Zeus is his partner. He won't leave until Ethan wakes up." The doctor sighed but nodded. "All right, just keep him calm." Zeus didn't need permission. As soon as Briggs opened the door, the canine German Shepherd bolted down the hallway, nose to the air, following Ethan's scent. Inside the dimly lit ICU room, Ethan lay unconscious, hooked to machines, an oxygen mask over his face. His chest rose and fell with slow, measured breaths. Too slow, too weak. Zeus jumped onto the side of the hospital bed, his front paws resting near Ethan's arm. He sniffed carefully, then let out a deep, low whine. His handler smelled different, faint, fragile. "Ethan," Briggs said softly, sitting beside him. "You got a stubborn partner here, you know that." Zeus didn't move. He just lowered his head onto Ethan's arm, his eyes never leaving his handler's face. The beeping of the monitors filled the silence. Briggs leaned back in his chair. "Guess we're waiting now, huh, buddy?" Zeus didn't respond. He just stayed there, unmoving, waiting, watching, refusing to leave. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the dimly lit hospital room. The sterile scent of antiseptic and medication filled the air, but Zeus barely noticed. His large paws rested firmly against the hospital bed, his head lowered onto Ethan's arm. The canine German Shepherd hadn't moved since they arrived, his watchful eyes locked onto his handler's motionless face. Briggs sat nearby, sipping from a cup of now cold coffee. The exhaustion weighed on him, but Zeus was unshakable. The dog had refused to rest, refused to eat, and refused to leave Ethan's side. The nurse had tried to coax him away once. Zeus had growled, not aggressively, but in warning. He wouldn't abandon Ethan. Not now, not ever. Briggs had chuckled, shaking his head. "You're a damn good partner, boy." Zeus barely flicked an ear in acknowledgement. His mind was elsewhere, waiting, watching, protecting. Inside the darkness, Ethan drifted. There was no pain here, only silence. It was like floating in an ocean with no waves, no sky, no horizon. He could hear voices, distant and distorted, but none of them were clear enough to reach him. Then something familiar, a sound, a whine, low, deep. Zeus. Ethan tried to move, but his body didn't respond. He was trapped in the void. The voices were louder now, but he still couldn't understand them. He felt like he was sinking, further and further, his strength slipping away. A memory flashed. Zeus, a rookie canine, barely a year old, staring at him with eager brown eyes, waiting for his first command. Ethan had reached out, ruffled his fur, and smiled. "We're gonna be the best damn team out there, buddy." Another memory, a late-night patrol, the streets empty, Zeus trotting beside him, ever vigilant. The first time Zeus saved his life, taking down a suspect before the guy could stab Ethan in the back. And then, the alley, the gunshot, pain, blood, darkness. A sharp whimper pulled him back. Ethan tried again. He fought against the weight, pushing through the fog clouding his mind. He wasn't alone. Zeus was waiting for him, with a force of will he didn't know he had left. Ethan opened his eyes. Briggs nearly dropped his coffee. Zeus's ears shot up as Ethan's fingers twitched. The heart monitor's beeps changed rhythm. His breathing shifted. Briggs was on his feet in an instant. "Ethan! Hey! Ethan! Can you hear me?" Ethan's eyelids fluttered. His throat moved as he swallowed, his chest rising in a slow but steady breath. Zeus let out a sharp, high-pitched bark. Ethan's lips barely moved, but the whisper came. "Zeus?" Briggs exhaled a relieved laugh. "Damn right, Zeus. He never left your side." Zeus nudged Ethan's arm, his tail giving the slightest wag. His handler was alive. Ethan blinked up at him, his voice hoarse. "Saved me. Again, huh, buddy?" Zeus licked his hand. Briggs smirked. "Yeah, and dragged my ass through half the city to do it." Ethan gave the smallest chuckle, a weak sound, but it was life. He turned his head just slightly, meeting Zeus's eyes. The unbreakable bond between them didn't need words. Zeus had done the impossible. He had brought Ethan back. Over the next few days, Ethan slowly regained his strength. The bullet had torn through muscle, but thankfully missed major organs. The doctor said it was a miracle he survived. Ethan had a different opinion. It wasn't a miracle, it was Zeus. The canine German Shepherd never left his side, not even when Ethan was moved to a private recovery room. Officers from the precinct came to visit, but it was Zeus who kept Ethan grounded. One night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The pain had faded to a dull ache, but something deeper lingered inside him. I should have seen it coming. Zeus lifted his head at the sound of Ethan's voice. Briggs, who had been half dozing in the chair, raised an eyebrow. "What?" Ethan exhaled, his jaw tightening. The shooter. I should have known something was off. I let my guard down. Briggs sat forward. "Ethan, don't do that. You're one of the best." And Zeus? He knew. He got to you in time. Ethan looked down at Zeus, running a hand over his fur. Yeah, he did. Zeus leaned into the touch, his warm brown eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "Don't make this your fault," Briggs said. "You're here. You made it." "And Zeus?" He smirked. "Well, I think he just earned Officer of the Year." Ethan chuckled softly. "Damn right he did." Zeus wagged his tail. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor and the occasional rustle of the blanket as Ethan Carter shifted in bed. It had been 3 days since he woke up, and though the worst was over, the pain still lingered, both physically and mentally. Zeus remained by his side, never leaving the room. The canine German Shepherd barely slept, always keeping a watchful eye on his handler. It was as if he knew Ethan was still fighting a battle within himself. Briggs leaned against the doorframe, sipping from yet another cup of stale hospital coffee. His gaze flicked between Ethan and Zeus. "You look like hell," Briggs said. Ethan smirked weakly. "Feel worse?" Briggs exhaled, stepping into the room. "The precinct's been asking about you. Everyone's ready to throw a damn parade for Zeus here." He motioned toward the dog, whose ears perked at the sound of his name. "They want to put him in for an award." Ethan reached out, scratching behind Zeus's ears. The dog let out a soft huff of approval, but didn't move from his post. "He doesn't care about awards," Ethan murmured. "He just cares that I'm still breathing." Briggs sat down, rubbing a hand over his face. "Yeah, well, we all do." The weight in his voice made Ethan pause. Briggs was there that night. He had seen the blood, the way Ethan's life had almost slipped away in that dark alley. Ethan sighed. How bad was it? Briggs hesitated, then leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "If Zeus hadn't gotten to me in time, you wouldn't be here." The truth hit like a hammer. Ethan already knew it, but hearing it from someone else made it real. That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The painkillers dulled the ache in his ribs, but nothing could quiet the storm in his mind. He kept replaying the moment in the alley, the gunshot, the darkness, the feeling of helplessness. Zeus, as if sensing his distress, lifted his head from where he rested beside the bed. His brown eyes locked onto Ethan's, filled with an understanding that no words could express. "You knew," Ethan murmured, reaching out to run his fingers through Zeus's thick fur. "You felt it before I did." Zeus didn't move, just let out a quiet whine. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I should have listened to you." Zeus nudged his hand, as if trying to push away the guilt. Ethan chuckled softly. "You really don't let me sulk, do you?" Zeus licked his hand once, then rested his head on Ethan's arm. Briggs had said Ethan shouldn't blame himself. The rational side of him agreed, but the part that had been lying on the cold pavement, bleeding out, struggling to breathe, that part wasn't so sure. The next morning, the doctor came in to check on him. "Your recovery is going well," she said, flipping through his chart. "If everything continues improving, you'll be able to leave in a few more days." Ethan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The moment the doctor left, he turned to Briggs, who had just walked in with fresh coffee. "I need to get back out there," Ethan said. Briggs blinked. "What?" "I need to get back on duty as soon as I'm cleared." Briggs let out a dry laugh. "You got shot less than a week ago." "You need to rest, Ethan." Ethan shook his head. "I can't just sit here. The longer I'm away, the harder it'll be to go back." Briggs studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "I get it, but don't rush this man. Your body needs time." Ethan glanced down at Zeus, who was watching him intently. "So does my head." Briggs didn't argue. He just handed Ethan the coffee and sat beside him. Zeus let out a deep breath and curled up at Ethan's side. He wasn't just Ethan's partner, he was his protector. And when the time came, he would be ready to stand by his side again. Ethan Carter sat on the edge of his hospital bed, rolling his shoulders slowly, testing his movement. The stitches still pulled at his skin, but the pain had dulled into something manageable. The doctor said he needed at least another week before considering light activity, but Ethan had never been good at sitting still. Zeus sat in front of him, his deep brown eyes watching every movement with the same sharp focus he used on the job. He knew something was coming. Briggs stood by the door, arms crossed. "You sure you want to do this?" Ethan glanced at him. "I have to." With a deep breath, he pressed his feet to the cold tile floor and stood. The moment he wobbled, Zeus was there, pressing his sturdy body against Ethan's leg, offering silent support. Ethan reached down, gripping the thick fur at Zeus's neck, grounding himself. Briggs watched the exchange, shaking his head. "You two are something else," Ethan smirked. "Yeah, well, he's stubborn." Zeus huffed as if agreeing. The first few steps were slow. Ethan felt every shift in his body, every lingering ache. But Zeus walked beside him, perfectly in sync, just like always. It wasn't just about physical recovery, it was about trust. The last time Ethan had been on his feet, he had been bleeding out in an alley. The last time he had walked, it had nearly been his last. Now each step forward felt like a silent promise. When they reached the door, Briggs held it open. "You ready to see the outside world again?" Ethan exhaled. "Yeah, let's do this." Zeus stepped out first, ears up, tail steady. His partner was walking again. That meant only one thing. Soon they would be back where they belonged, together. Ethan Carter took his first steps outside the hospital, feeling the crisp New York City air hit his skin. It wasn't the biting cold of the night he had been shot, but the chill still sent a reminder through his body. Zeus stayed close, his body pressed lightly against Ethan's leg, his movements precise. The canine German Shepherd was more than a service dog. He was Ethan's anchor. Every step Ethan took, Zeus matched it, ready to steady him if needed. Briggs walked beside them, eyeing Ethan carefully. "You sure about this?" Ethan let out a slow breath. "I need to feel normal again." Normal. That word felt distant, almost foreign after everything that had happened. He wasn't just recovering from a gunshot wound. He was recovering from the feeling of helplessness. Lying in that alley, bleeding, unable to move, had shaken something deep inside him. He had always been the one in control, the one protecting others. But that night, he had been powerless. If not for Zeus, he wouldn't be here. Zeus seemed to sense Ethan's thoughts because he nosed his hand gently, drawing him out of his head. Briggs sighed. "All right, let's take it slow. No sudden movements. And if you feel like you're gonna fall—" "I know," Ethan interrupted. "Zeus has got me." Briggs smirked. "Damn right he does." They walked down the hospital's front steps, moving toward the parking lot. Ethan's squad car had been recovered after the shooting, and he was determined to get back into it, even if he wasn't cleared for duty yet. When they reached the vehicle, Ethan stopped. His reflection in the driver's side window stared back at him. He looked different, tired, worn, changed. Zeus sat at his side, waiting. Briggs watched him carefully. "Ethan, you don't have to rush this." Ethan gripped the door handle. "I do." With a deep breath, he opened the door. The familiar scent of the car, leather, old coffee, and Zeus's fur greeted him. He hesitated only for a second before he slid into the driver's seat. His ribs protested, the stitches pulling slightly, but he ignored it. Zeus jumped into the passenger seat, his usual spot, and for the first time since the shooting, Ethan felt like himself again. His hands rested on the steering wheel, fingers tracing the grooves. Briggs leaned against the open door. "You're not driving yet," Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "I know." Zeus let out a soft huff, as if agreeing with Briggs. They sat in silence for a moment. Ethan closed his eyes, listening to the familiar sound of Zeus breathing beside him. It was grounding. It reminded him of every late-night patrol, every stakeout, every foot chase where Zeus had been right there, never leaving his side. Briggs tapped the roof of the car. All right, you got your moment. Let's get you back inside before your doctor chews my ass out. Ethan opened his eyes, nodding. Yeah, slowly, he stepped out of the car. Zeus jumped out right after him, keeping pace as Ethan made his way back toward the hospital entrance. He still had time before he could officially return to duty, but this was the first step back to who he was. As they entered the hospital lobby, a few nurses stopped to watch. Some of them had been there the night Ethan was brought in, unconscious and barely breathing. Seeing him walking with Zeus at his side brought smiles and whispers. One of them, a young nurse named Sophia, stepped forward. Sergeant Carter, it's good to see you up and moving. Ethan gave a small nod. Feels good to be moving. Sophia smiled down at Zeus. And you, Zeus? You're famous around here, you know that. Zeus wagged his tail once, but kept his usual serious expression. Sophia chuckled. I guess you don't let fame get to your head, huh? Briggs grinned. Nah, he's too professional for that. They continued down the hallway, making their way back to Ethan's room. But just as Ethan was about to step inside, the captain walked in. Captain Matthews was a seasoned officer, his face lined with years of hard work and stress. He had been on the force long before Ethan, and his presence commanded respect. Ethan straightened automatically. Captain. Matthews studied him for a moment, then glanced at Zeus. Heard you've been up and walking. Yes, sir, Ethan said. The captain nodded. Good, because as soon as you're cleared, I want you and Zeus back on duty. Ethan blinked. You're not putting me on desk duty? Matthews scoffed. Carter, I know you. If I stick you behind a desk, you'll go crazy. You belong in the field with him. He nodded toward Zeus. The department needs officers like you, and Zeus has already proven he's worth more than half the force combined. Briggs smirked. I'd say more than half. Matthews ignored him. I won't rush you, but when you're ready, your spot is waiting. Ethan felt something unclench in his chest. He hadn't realized how much he had needed to hear that. Thank you, sir, he said sincerely. Matthews gave him a curt nod before turning to leave. But just before he stepped out, he added, Oh, and Carter. Yes, sir. You might want to stop by the mayor's office when you're back. Apparently, Zeus is getting some kind of medal. Briggs let out a low whistle. Damn. You hear that, boy? You're getting an award. Zeus wagged his tail slightly, but his eyes never left Ethan. The captain left, and Briggs turned to Ethan. Well, looks like you're not the only one who's a hero. Ethan exhaled, rubbing Zeus's head. He's always been a hero. Zeus leaned into the touch, his warm brown eyes filled with something deeper than loyalty. Understanding. Ethan wasn't fully healed yet. He still had a long way to go. But one thing was certain. When he was ready, Zeus would be there, leading him back where they belonged, together. The days passed slowly, each one bringing Ethan Carter closer to full recovery. The hospital staff had stopped treating him like a fragile patient, and more like the cop he had always been. But no one watched him more closely than Zeus. The canine German Shepherd remained by his side, his sharp eyes tracking every movement, every shift in Ethan's breathing. He never let Ethan out of his sight, not even for a moment. Briggs showed up every morning with fresh coffee and updates from the precinct. The gang responsible for the ambush was being hunted down, and the streets were buzzing with talk about Zeus's heroism. You should see the press coverage, Briggs had said, scrolling through his phone. Everyone wants an interview with the dog who saved his partner's life. Ethan had chuckled, glancing at Zeus. You ready for stardom, buddy? Zeus had simply blinked, unimpressed. Fame didn't interest him. Only Ethan did. By the end of the week, the doctors finally gave Ethan the news he had been waiting for. You're healing well, Doctor, Harrison told him. You'll still need physical therapy, and I don't want you straining yourself, but you're cleared to go home. Home? The words settled in Ethan's chest, both comforting and unfamiliar. He hadn't been home since the night of the shooting. Briggs clapped him on the shoulder. Guess that means I'm your chauffeur today, Ethan smirked. Better than taking a cab. Zeus's ears perked up, sensing the shift in mood. He could feel it. His handler was going home. The drive back was quiet, the weight of the past week settling over Ethan. He had nearly died. If Zeus hadn't acted, if Briggs hadn't arrived in time, he wouldn't be sitting in the passenger seat, watching the city blur past the window. Zeus sat in the back seat, but his head was between the front seats, his eyes never leaving Ethan. When they pulled up to Ethan's house, Briggs put the car in park. "You good?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "Yeah?" The house looked exactly the same, yet something about it felt different. He stepped out of the car, his legs still a little stiff, but Zeus was at his side instantly, matching his pace. As soon as Ethan opened the door, Zeus pushed past him, sniffing every inch of the house, checking for danger. He circled back to Ethan, satisfied, and let out a soft huff as if saying, "It's safe. You're home." Briggs leaned against the doorframe. "You need anything?" Ethan shook his head. "I think I just need some time." Briggs nodded. "All right, but if you need anything, call me." With that, Briggs left, and Ethan was alone with Zeus. For the first time in weeks, he could breathe. Zeus nudged his leg, and Ethan smiled, dropping to one knee to wrap his arms around the dog. "We made it, buddy." Zeus licked his cheek. They were home, together. Ethan stood outside of the precinct, breathing in the crisp morning air. Zeus sat beside him, ears up, eyes locked onto his handler. Today was the day. Ethan placed a hand on Zeus's head. The story of the cop and his loyal K9 partner, Zeus, is a powerful testament to the strength of loyalty, perseverance, and an unbreakable bond of friendship. In the most critical moment, the dog wasn't just a protector, it was the hero who saved its partner's life. The special connection between a human and an animal goes beyond any limits, revealing a simple but deeply moving truth. No one has to fight alone. If you've been touched by this incredible story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring video. The story of Zeus and his handler is just one example of the loyalty and heroism we aim to share. Join our community and explore more incredible stories with us. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to share this video to spread the message of love and resilience.